Hi guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to make this cute baby elephant, and you're going to need 194 bands total. You can also just make the face charm and you'll need 109 bands for that and 85 for the body. So let's get started. Let's start by making the eyes, and I already made one. I'm going to use ocean blue, taking that single band, looping it 4 times on the hook. Taking a single white band, I'm making it 2 colors, looping it twice on one side and twice on the other, and getting it all onto a single gray band. And if this is too hard for you, just go ahead and use a single band for a one color eye. Keep it in order. So that's my eye. Go ahead and make your second one. Let's make the trunk, taking a single band, looping it on the second peg from the bottom, twist to the left, creating an X, twist to the right, and looping it back onto the second peg from the bottom, like that. Pull the bands again, twist to the right, and looping it the second time over the second peg from the bottom. So you should have 2 loops on top and an X in the bottom. On the left side of your loom, grabbing the bottom single, loop up and over to the center. Repeat on the other side, grabbing the bottom single, loop up and over to the center. And let's get it onto our hook, our knot for a trunk. Now I'm going to take a single gray band, looping it twice on one side and twice on the other for our trunk. And you can make it however thick you want. I'm going to use a single gray band, twist, double, and pulling all the loops onto the single we doubled. Pull it in the center and getting it onto our hook. There's my trunk, the front of my trunk. And on this baby elephant, I took 2 single bands and doubled it for his trunk, and you can do it like that. I'm just making it a little thinner, so that's my first set. Second one, I'll make it a little thicker towards his face, taking 2 single bands, twist, double, getting the loops onto my hook and pulling the ones off of my hook and onto the 2 single bands we doubled. And make sure it's centered. So there's my trunk, and you can make it longer if you want, or you can keep it this short. I'll make it 1 more rung longer. So taking 2 single bands, twist, double, and pulling all those loops very carefully onto our hook. Now getting all the loops onto a single band to add to our face very carefully. Now let's make the feet, and you can make it as big as you want and as long as you want. I'm taking a single tan, looping it 3 times on my hook, taking 2 gray bands, and I'm going to loop it 3 times and kind of intertwine it around my tan band to create the toe effect for my baby elephant. And you can mess around with it later once it's off your hook and onto your elephant. Taking 2 gray bands and pulling all those loops onto the 2 single bands, and you can use 3 bands if you want for the feet. Taking 2 more single bands, pulling those loops onto the 2 single bands, and let's do 1 more time. So there are my toes, and getting everything onto a single band. And we're going to put it aside, and if you're afraid that it's going to come apart, just do a loose slip knot, so that way foot bands stay together. go ahead and pause the video to make 3 more for a total of 4 for our feet, and come back when you're done. Now I'm going to show you how to make the ears, and I'm going to make it in a different color so you can see, but I'm going to be making my elephant gray. I already made my ears. On the loom, I'm going to use this area so you can see very clearly what I'm doing. On the loom, on the right side, we're going to start with a single band, looping it from the right first to the right second. And then we'll go around the loom, the top of our loom, with a single band, coming diagonally to the left side. We'll be working with single bands, and we'll come down 3 times. That's 1, 2, 3 on our left side, and coming in diagonally from the left 4th to the center 5th peg. Now taking single band, coming down the center of our loom to meet where we looped diagonally in from the left side. Stop there, so that's what yours should look like. Now coming out diagonally from the 5th center to the 5th left peg, and then we'll go diagonally across to the right with a single band. So that's what yours should look like. Now taking a single band, and we'll close up from the 2nd to the 3rd all the way to this corner end peg with our single band. So there's my ear so far, and now let's make the extension for our ear. For the extension of our ear, we're taking a single band, looping from the center to the left diagonally, and coming down twice with a single band. With a single band, we're coming diagonally in from the left to the center, and again with single bands, we're coming down the center of our peg to close up our ear extension. So that's what yours should look like. Now taking a single band, we're going to use that as holding bands. So placing it diagonally from the right peg all the way across to cover these 3 pegs. And once again, pull it all the way across with a single band on these 3 pegs. So those are our holding bands. Taking a single band, and we're going to loop this end peg 3 times. So that's 1, 2, 3 to cap it off. Now we're going to go under the cap band, grabbing the top single and loop up and onto itself, and we can continue all the way up to this first peg. So reach in, grabbing the bottom single, loop up and onto itself. Let's go back under the cap band, grab that bottom single, loop up, and it should go to the left, and continue up the left to the center first peg for our ear extension. Always grabbing the bottom single. So that's what your ear extension should look like. Now let's take these bands off of the left side of our pegs, and let's get these loops off of the top first peg for our ear extension onto a hook, and taking the other sides off of our loom very carefully, and making sure our holding bands that are sticking out are visible like bunny ears, like that. Now we're going to add it onto our ear. The part where it's on the hook, you should have 4 loops, and we're going to attach it on the first left peg on the loom. So carefully getting all those loops off of our hook and onto the first left peg on the loom. For our holding bands, we're going to pull the first top one onto the center second peg for the time being, and the other one will pull onto the third center peg. And where the cap band is, you should have 3 loops. For our cap band, get those 3 loops onto a hook, and we're going to attach it onto the 4th peg on the left. So pull it out very carefully and attach it to the 4th peg on the left side. And then we want to make sure the rest of our ear extension are not attached anywhere else, just on these 2 pegs. Now for our holding band, the bottom band, we're going to pull it up and we're going to loop it on the 3rd peg in each row. So pull it across, covering these 3 pegs, pull out the holding band, twist it down, creating the X on the outside, and we're going to cover it from the right 3rd peg to the center 4th. So very carefully, get the loop that we twist onto the right 3rd to the center 4th. So that's what yours should look like. Now for the first holding band on top, we're going to pull that out very carefully, and we're going to cover the 2nd peg on each row. So just carefully pull that out and just attach it to those 3 pegs on top. So those are our holding bands so far. Taking another single band, twist, double it, and we'll put it on these 3 triangles on our ear. So getting the single we doubled and putting it on those 3 bands, like that. Taking another single band, and we're going to cap this end peg off by looping it 3 times. So that's 1, 2, 3. And that's what your ear should look like so far. Go under the cap band, grabbing the top single, and loop up and onto itself. And mine went up straight. Go back in, grabbing the bottom single, and loop up to the center diagonally, creating teardrops, and continue to the left side. And now we'll loop from the left to the center, reaching in, grabbing the bottom single, looping to the center peg. Push it down a little, and now we'll continue up the center all the way to the first center peg. So reaching in the center 5th peg, grabbing the top single, and loop up and onto itself, and just continue. Remember, only grabbing the bottom single. We'll stop there. Now in the 5th center peg, we're going to reach in, grabbing that bottom single, loop up to the left side, and continue on the left. Go all the way under, grabbing the bottom single, and loop up, and continue up the left, reaching in, grabbing only the bottom single. Pull everything back, and loop all the way around. So we're to the first center peg of our loom. We're going to grab the bottom single, loop up to the right first peg. Now on the right first peg, we're going to reach in, grabbing that single, the bottom single, and loop it down to the 2nd right peg. And this is where we'll attach it to our body. So we'll stop there. Now let's finish the right side from the bottom. So we see our teardrop stopped here. We're going to continue from there. Reach in, grabbing the bottom single, loop up and onto itself, and just continue up to the 2nd peg on our right. So that's what your ear should look like. You should have teardrops up and down. And taking a single band, we're going to put a hook on the 2nd peg on the right all the way through, grabbing our single band, hold it, and let's take our ear off the loom. And you can go ahead and pause the video and make your second ear in the color that you want. Get the loops onto a hook. So that's what your ear should look like, and you can fix any loose bands, and you can just tie a loose slip knot so your ear doesn't fall apart to add to your body later. So there are my ears. Do your second one and come back when you're done. Let's do our head, taking 2 single bands, and we'll loop it from one peg, twist in the center, across to the other one. And we're going to cover 6 pegs, 2 single bands, loop it from one peg, twist in the center, and looping it across. Your last 2 single bands, loop it on the first center peg, twist, and loop it down to the third center peg. So that was row number 1. Row number 2, we're taking 6 single bands, covering our 6 pegs, and looping the bottom 2 bands up and over. And you should have 2 loops left per peg. Push everything down. That was row number 2, and we're going to expand, pulling these 2 loops off of the center 3rd peg and pulling it to the center 4th peg. Now taking a single loop on the 2nd right peg that's attached to the 1st and moving it to the 3rd. So pulling the top loop off of the 2nd peg, check to make sure it's attached to the 1st, and this one isn't, so I'm pulling aside, grabbing the other loop off, it's attached to the 1st, and moving to the 3rd. And then we'll reattach this loop we took off back onto the 2nd right peg. So now your 2nd and 3rd right peg each has a loop, and let's repeat on the left, pulling the top loop off. Check to make sure it's attached to the 1st, and it is, so I'm looping it to the 3rd left peg. So now the 2nd and 3rd left peg each has a loop, and we're up to 8 pegs. Row number 3, we'll add the trunk. We're taking our trunk onto a hook and looping it on the first right to the center 1st peg. So that's where your trunk should be on your loom, and covering the rest of our loom with a single band around our 8 pegs, and then we'll loop the bottom bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. The first left should have 2 loops to pull up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops on the peg. The 2nd and 3rd, you're pulling a single band up and over, leaving 2 loops per peg. Just go around your loom, leaving 2 loops per peg for all 8 pegs. Push it down. That was row number 3. Row 4, we'll add the eyes, getting our eyes, and we're going to attach it onto the right 1st to the right 2nd peg, and the other eye will attach it on the center 1st to the left 1st peg on the loom. Now for the rest, we're covering with a single band around our pegs, and then looping the bottom bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. And you should be looping 2 bands now. Up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops per peg. push it down. That was row number 4. Row number 5, we're going to attach our ear, get our ears, and undo our loose slipknot band. And we're going to attach our ear, the first one on the first left to the second left peg, and we want to make sure the lobes are pointing down. So attach our ear with our lobes pointing down on the first left to the second left. For our right ear, undoing our loose slipknot band and getting the loops, and we are going to make sure our lobe is pointing down and attaching it on the second right to third right peg. So our ears are on. Now taking a single band, covering the rest of our 8 pegs, and we'll loop the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. So that's what your elephant's head should look like at this point. And push it down a little bit. We're going to take it off the loom just in case it comes off. So anywhere on your loom, grab the 2 loops off a peg and just go around clockwise, making sure the ears are on the outside, getting the 2 loops off of each peg and onto our hook. So there's my elephant's head so far, and let's stuff him, and you can use whatever you want. I'm using gray bands so that way it doesn't show through the little holes around our face, and don't overstuff it. Taking a single band, and we're going to pull all those loops off of our hook and onto the single band to tie a slip knot. Get it onto a hook and pull one through the other and cinch it off. So there's our elephant's head, and if you just want the elephant's head, you're done. Just make sure you fix the eyes to the way you want it to look, and make sure it's not sticking out too much. It looks kind of funny. Just push it inside his head. So there's our baby elephant's face. And let's tuck in the charm string, but if you want it on there, that's okay too, if you just want the elephant's head. And make sure you squish it down so it's round, but we'll fix it later once it's off the loom with the body. To add the body, we're going to get a hook on the back of our head in the center of our head, and we're going to pull 8 loops onto a hook. Like that. So I have 8 loops onto my hook in the center of the back of my head. So that's what yours should look like, and it looks like it's row number 1 to row number 3 that I pulled the 8 bands onto my hook. With 4 single bands, we're going to get all those loops onto a hook and getting all the 8 loops off of our hook and onto the 4 single bands. So that's what yours should look like right now. On our loom with our chin up, we're going to pull and put the 4 loops on the first center peg, twist in the center, and loop the other side onto the second left peg on a loom. So that's what yours should look like. And now we're going to pull the top 2 loops off of the first center peg and pulling it to the right first peg, like that, and pulling 2 loops off of the second left peg, the top 2, and looping it onto the third center peg. So that's what yours should look like at this point. Now taking 2 single bands, we're going to cover these 2 pegs for a total of 6 pegs for row 1. So loop it, cross in the center, and stretch it to the other side. Row number 2, we're going to add our legs. So get our legs. If you have it in a loose slip knot, pull the loops off, and we are going to attach it, the first one, on the first center to the left first peg. The second leg, we're going to get the loops and attaching it onto the left second to the center third. So that's what it should look like, and it should be pointing out and covering the rest of our 6 pegs with a single band and looping the bottom 2 bands up and over to the center. So go under, grabbing the bottom 2 bands, and loop up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Push it down. That was row number 2, and we're going to expand. We're going to pull these 2 loops off of the center third and moving it to the center fourth. And once again, we're going to take a single loop off of the second side peg that's attached to the first and moving it to the third. So pulling the top loop off, the side right second peg, check to make sure it's attached to the first, and mine is, so I'm looping it to the third. Do it the other side, grabbing the top single loop off, and check to make sure it's attached to the first, which this is also, and looping it to the third side peg. So the second and third side pegs should each have a loop. So that's what yours should look like, and make sure your elephant's legs are pointing out. Now we've covered 8 pegs. Now taking 8 single bands, covering the 8 pegs, and then looping the bottom bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. The first side peg each has 2 loops. Loop those up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops. The second and third has a single loop at the bottom to pull up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops per peg, and continue around your loom on all 8 pegs. Make sure you have 2 loops left per peg. So that was row number 3. Rows 4 and 5, we'll do the same thing. We're looping 8 single bands around our 8 pegs, and then looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. It's pretty repetitive, so I'm going to fast forward through rows 4 and 5. So that was row number 5 for me. Row 6, we're going to add the hind legs. I'm going to take our loops, undo any loose slip knot we did for our legs, and attaching it on the center first to the left first peg for our one leg, and the other one I'm attaching it on the left second to left third peg. and make sure this band isn't twisted. For the rest of our 8 pegs, we're taking a single band, covering the 8 pegs, and then looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. This is our last row, and we're going to stuff our elephant afterwards. We're almost done. Now let's take it off the loom. I'm going to grab these 2 loops off the right 3rd peg and going counterclockwise. You can go whichever direction you're comfortable with, getting the 2 loops off of your loom and onto your hook. So there's our baby elephant so far, and let's stuff them. If you have gray bands, that would work best so it doesn't show, but you can stuff them with whatever you have, tissue papers, cotton balls, anything. But don't overstuff his body. So there's my baby elephant so far, and now let's tie him off, getting a slip knot band, pulling all the loops off of our hook and onto the single band. And cinching off his bottom. And fix his body so that way you don't see any bands. Scrunch his head, fix his eyes, push it in, making sure it's not protruding out too much, and get the look that you want. So for our tail, I'm just going to use a slip knot band and wrap it around my finger and roll it under to tie the tip off. And if you need a hook to help you, then go ahead and do that. You just want to tie the tip of the band to create the tail. So there are our cute 3D baby elephants. I hope you like them. Thanks for watching.